In this video, I'm going to introduce you to HI2001. I want to talk you through the weekly expectations, through the assessment that you will successfully complete and maybe even enjoy, and through other technicalities to do with the subject. I want to introduce you to the subject themes, those deep themes that underpin this topic, and I want to show you how they're reflected in the topics that we'll address each week. I also want you to have a look at the structure of the PowerPoints and note that there are consistently 3 PowerPoints that come at the start of each of my PowerPoint presentations. Let's get started. I've told you to look out for the opening 3 PowerPoints. This is the first, it's the contents, and it tells you what we're doing in this video and in this week of the subject. The next tells you the key questions, and its aim is to guide you in your approach to each week's material. And this third slide is a guide to further reading in the subject. It's brief for this week, but it's really useful when you come to identify topics that you're interested in and that you want to explore further on your own. This is a really good place to look for resources when you're starting to write your research essay, when you need a guide just to get started. Back to the contents for this week. This week, we're looking at what you need to do to get through the subject successfully, and that's each week over the subject as a whole and how to manage your study in the subject. And then we look at the subject itself, and I love the subject because the weekly topics are fantastic and it's got key underlying subject themes, which I think are fascinating. So let's get there. We get there weekly. Each week you need to set aside time to watch the video material, and you can watch it on double speed. I tend to stand up reasonably well to double speed. I put my material on YouTube, so you've got that ability to adjust it, and to do things like make YouTube generate subtitles for you if that's what you want. And if you really can't bear to watch videos, which I'm understanding of, then at the very least, work your way through the PowerPoints and make sure that you know what we're covering. The PowerPoints are a skeletal version of that. There would be no point making videos in which I just read out the PowerPoints. That would be very dull for all of us. I like to think the videos extend and enrich the topics gestured to on the PowerPoint slides, but reading the PowerPoints is certainly better than nothing, and make sure you do that before you come to tutorial and before you take your weekly quiz. In addition, there are those weekly readings, and they're required. In history subjects, I do expect you to read. You've got to do them before you come to tutorial, and then we'll discuss them. And if you find them perplexing, or if you find them difficult to engage with, come to tutorial and say that, because we can unpick what went wrong, what the author could have done better, what topics aren't clearly expressed, or what background you need to engage with them properly. But look at the readings. Get through them before you come to tutorial, and bring questions about them, or comments, or criticisms. This is history. We're not always nice about other historians. That's preparation work for coming to tutorial. And this is a flex subject, so not everybody is going to come to tutorial in a physical sense. Some of you will choose to engage online. Some of you will engage online because you don't have any other choice, unfortunately, not being based in Townsville. And some of you will choose to manage the subject independently, supported by the worksheets, which are available in the LearnJCU folders each week. You need to do one of those things. Turn up either in person or online. And I think it's great for students to get to talk to each other and to have the sense that other people are engaging with the material that they're seeing and engaging differently or raising similar questions or having the same problems with it. So I would recommend, if you can come in person or online, to do that. But if independent work suits you better, or if you've got other commitments that mean it's just not possible to make that tutorial time, then there is that worksheet in the subject folder each week. And that's useful for people who are in the room as well. You can think about how what we're doing engages with the topics laid out on that worksheet, and it's a guide to what to expect. After having done all that, and really make sure you do that, engage with the video material, engage with the required readings, do the thinking that the tutorial worksheet is designed to outline, then complete the quiz for that week. The quizzes are shortish, and they're designed to test your engagement with the material you've seen each week. They're not designed to test your ability to remember detail, to test your ability to pick up themes, to engage, to think about what you're seeing in that material from that week. Because they are online, there's no way I can shut them down completely, and I don't try to. I recommend you think about what would be useful to you while you complete them. I think the PowerPoints might be useful. I think having access to the required reading or your notes on it might be useful. You can also use search engines, but when you do that, be cautious, because there is the requirement in the subject to note where you have used AI. And at present, using a search engine is to engage with AI. So you would need to complete that AI statement. You might like to consider having a ready-to-go copy and paste AI statement ready to put into your quiz at the end in case you use a search engine. But then you might also need to consider whether there's AI involved in spell checking and in grammar checking and in what you're using as a word processing tool. I mention this because it's an interesting topic, and I think it's something valuable to think about at present. Where is AI? Where are the large language models being used? You need to think about these things because you need to complete that statement. I don't think AI is completely avoidable these days because the grammar checkers are so fabulous, because the spell checkers are something that I would really like you to have switched on throughout your work in the subject. AI is not just something churning out text for you. It's underpinning a lot of the systems that we use these days. And I think you need to consider that because AI is not reliable. Anyway, in the week, you've engaged with the video material or the PowerPoints or both. You've completed the required reading. You've completed the tutorial material in whatever format. And you've completed the quiz. You're not quite done yet. You need to keep an eye on the larger picture, which is the assessment items in the subject. You will need to do enough independent work to produce a good virtual exhibition and to produce a good research essay. And JCU has produced a guide to your time commitment in a trimester subject. It suggests that in each week, you should spend 13 hours on the subject. The full load is 3 subjects. That would be 39 hours total in a week. And a standard working week is 40 hours. So that's about fair. In this subject, that means that you have at least 8 hours of independent study that you need to be using well each week. And it means that overall, in that virtual exhibition, and in that research essay, I expect to see 80 hours of work. You can do that work when it suits you, but you do need to do it. And there are tools that you need to use to help you do it. You need to be able to navigate the Learn JCU site, and you need to tell me when things go wrong with it. I really appreciate it when students send me an email and say, I can't find this thing, or this isn't working, or I can't open this document, because then I can go and fix it. And I can fix it for everyone, not just the student who's alerted me. And I try to keep that Learn JCU site full of useful things. I also try to manage the filing system so that the folder labeling is clear, the folder content is logical. Again, we can critique this in tutorial if you wish, and you can tell me that I need to rearrange things. I also try to make it easy for you to manage your work in this subject. As I've said, I use YouTube because I think that's a good system and that students are generally familiar with it and with the tools that it offers. I use the reading system and I think it's fabulous, although sometimes it crashes, and then if students alert me, I can give students guidance to how to access the readings for that week, even if the link from Learn JCU is not working perfectly. The assessments folder is also something that you should explore early so that you know what is in it. I have separated out the assessment descriptions so that you can see for each assessment easily what it is that you're expected to do and how you will be graded. Think of that marking rubric as an easy checklist to make sure that you've completed everything you need to. The drop boxes are there as well. And the Learn JCU drop boxes these days work pretty well. I still recommend that you don't leave it until the very last minute to put your work through that drop box. But if something goes wrong, send me an email. We'll work it out. History does require that independent work, and that independent work is dependent on being able to use a library. Libraries have changed in their format in the last few decades. There's a whole lot of material online. But one of the things that remains true is that librarians are fantastic people and wonderful resources. They can help you, and they're very happy to help you when you go up to the desk at the library, or when you engage in the online chat function through the library catalogue. The librarian on the other side of that conversation is thrilled. Librarians love solving research problems, and they love helping students. They will help you find resources if you ask them. They will help you consider where you can turn for information, and the sources that they direct you to will be good sources, because not all sources are created equal, and not everyone who claims to be an expert actually is. You need to be critical of your sources, and being familiar with libraries and how libraries function and think about the material that they hold is really useful for that. The library also is a centre for help for students. As I say, the people at the desk or in the online chat are there, and they want to help you. The library also provides study spaces, and through the library site and through Learn JCU these days, you can gain access to Studiosity, which is an out-of-hours, I really need help knowing what I'm doing in this piece of assessment service. The person on the other end of Studiosity is not going to be a historian, but they can still offer good guidance on writing, on locating resources, and on finding sources that will answer the questions that you have. There is a limit to how many hours of Studiosity you get through JCU, but it's a pretty good limit. And you can access Studiosity through other systems. In Townsville, I know you can access it as well through city libraries. So be alert to that and try the system, see what it can offer you. And I keep saying, if there are issues, send me an email. To add to that, if there are issues, grab me at the end of the tutorial time, or send me an email and make a meeting, either in person or online. I want you to succeed in this subject, and I want you to enjoy it. And I'm happy to put in the work to make that happen. And this is why I want you to enjoy this subject, because it's got fantastic themes running through it, big and important and glamorous themes. In this subject, we're going to look at trade, we're going to look at empire, we're going to look at inequity, we're going to look at societal change, and we've got other themes running through, things I'm really excited about. Technology, including animal technology. And you'll notice in my deliberately not ideal virtual exhibition example, I'm a bit fixated on camels, disease, and that's something that COVID has helped alert us to, the significance of global connections in the rise of pandemics. I'm an environmental historian, and historians who undertake global history often are. I'm interested in environmental change and engagement, human engagement with the environment. And because the subject is being taught at JCU, because we are located in Northern Australia, it provides you with an opportunity to think about the place of Northern Australia in the world and the connections that we have with other places, the networks that we are engaged with. It's a big subject, it is the world, it is 2,000 years, but using these themes, it makes sense, and we drag out of that mess of the past a really interesting and useful type of history. And we do that week by week. And here is how we do that week by week. We have 10 weeks in a trimester. We have 10 topics that we deal with in the video material and PowerPoint material. I also put in extra video material within the Learn JCU site, because there are all sorts of fascinating things to look at within the subject. And students often want to talk about those videos because they are showing the subject in action in some place. We start this week with this introduction and thinking about the structure of the world before it gets to global. When we can say we have a global network is something that historians love to talk about. and generally gets pinned down as the start of the Manila Galleon route. We start before that because we need to know what large networks get connected up, and it is fascinating to think about the large networks that are present before we get to connecting them up to make global networks. So we look at that, and in particular we look at the Silk Roads and the networks connected up to that massive structure across the heart of Eurasia. Some of the places that are central to this subject may be a little unfamiliar, and this week also gives us a chance to think about how we can usefully divide the world up into regions, and what regions we might not be personally familiar with, but that are actually really important in driving trade, driving empire, driving those things that underpin the networks in this subject. We still don't get to global in the second week. In the second week, we look at empires, because empires are very important to building large networks. And again, it's going to be fun. Some of those empires are going to be unfamiliar, and you're going to wonder, how did I not know about this? Or why did I not realize how important this was? That's the fun of this subject. It twists the way you see the past, and all of a sudden it springs into perspective in a really interesting way. Week 3 for me is the heart of this subject. It's the Columbian Exchange. And that's Columbian in terms of Columbus the person rather than Columbia the country. This looks at how people have reordered the world in terms of its biota. And for me, it is fascinating stuff. Week 4, we look at slavery, a large network there, and at the various slave networks that have existed over time, and the other networks of unfree labour. So I introduced slavery as a particular institution, but it's not the only form of unfree labour, and it's not the only way in which people can be exploited for their labour. We look at slavery and those other ways in week 4. In week 5, we have revolutions, and that's also a lot of fun. And then you get a breather, space to catch up on that first part of trimester and to prepare for the second half. In week 6, we look at modern empires. And by modern, I don't mean 20th century. And we look at an entity called the company state. Again, this is a big and important thing that you may have never have come across before. It's worth having a look at. Week 7, we look at nationalism and its rise, and we get to the First World War. So finally, we're in the 20th century. In week 8, we do some more big wars, and we focus on the Cold War period and what that means for people's experiences and for global connections. Week 9, we pick up on that idea of war and what it does to connections and disconnections. We start looking thematically, and we do break out the chronological structure of this subject a little bit. And in week 10, we get to that big question about what does this all mean for us, and particularly for our location in Northern Australia. It's a chance to think about what you've seen in the subject, how it's changed your view of the world and of the networks that we're part of, and to bring it all together as a kind of background to pin future history subjects to. I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope that you enjoy this subject.